What's happening, everybody? Welcome into the Take the North podcast, along with Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune. I am Mark Grote of Chicago Sports Radio 670. The Score. Adam Studzinski is our executive producer. Round 2 against the Detroit Lions on Sunday. The Bears, of course, lost to Detroit 23-20 on Thanksgiving Day, which is pretty amazing when you think about how abysmal and embarrassing that first half was, and essentially the death knell in that game for Matt Eberflus, and running out of time at the end, which was just one of many nightmare losses along this 8-game losing streak. So I don't know, man. I mean, you'd like to think that they get up for these teams a second time in a row, but it certainly did not work against Minnesota. That's for sure. Dan, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right. It's good to hear your energized voice this afternoon. I am on the injury report this week, limited participant (parentheses illness), battling through it, and it looks like you've got good spirit. You're going to carry me along here. There's a lot to talk about with this football team and how it squeezes anything out of these last 3 weeks, right? And I don't know what they've got left, in the reserves. And that's part of the conversation we'll have today. But obviously you were out there at House on Wednesday afternoon, and you got a better feel for how they're picking themselves up for the 8th consecutive week.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I asked Thomas Brown, the Bears interim head coach, is what did you see when you watched that first game, the first half specifically against Detroit, like in the name of actually looking at the ball game? I asked a question in that regard, even though everything seems to be about the big picture. And one of the things he said was, obviously, you've got to eliminate penalties. There were a lot of key penalties throughout that game and in the first half of play. And he also made a big deal out of winning your one-on-one battles. To that end, I took that. By the way, DJ Moore, a little under the weather too. You can tell he was battling. He had a cold. And to be clear, Dan's talking about staying home today. I missed 3 days last week, and yesterday I'm amazed with myself today because I did not think I would make it to Hallis Hall today either. But I am here, and somehow the 24-hour rule did apply to me. But Dan, I want you to listen carefully to this conversation I was having with DJ Moore about winning one-on-ones. I think you'll be very happy, especially towards the end of this, with the way it's wrapped up. Okay. What's the key to winning a one-on-one matchup?
Being creative, winning at the line, and then just going from there.
How gratifying is it when you win that battle and get the football thrown to you?
What?
How gratifying is it? Does it please you?
Man, when you win your one-on-one, it's a big play to be made because, you just got that one person to beat. Once you do it, you got grass to run.
My favorite, I want to hear it again, where I say how gratifying is. He's like, what? Like I said something horrible. So now we've got Dan Wiederer. If you didn't remember earlier in the season, I don't even remember what the context was, but you asked DJ Moore, does that please you? And he looked at you like you were a crazy person.
Yeah,
and I got the look today too, and pleasing actually worked for him today.
My question was about whether Caleb's bossiness as a rookie trying to take charge was something that gave him a little bit of optimism, which is how I probably should have phrased it. Your question here is about winning one-on-one. So we are trying to tap into DJ, and DJ is not really there right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably a pretty good way to put it. And he even said, like, I don't have all the tape, but he was being asked about the offseason, and he said, he's like, we got to get it right before we play a single game next year. That was his way, Dan, of saying that everything has to be different. Obviously, a lot will be different, anticipating a new head coach in the building. I don't think any of that has changed, despite what Thomas Brown has been able to do in his short time here and the likability factor. But that's a big deal. And honestly, Dan, today you had, Roma Dunze reflecting on this season. You had Caleb Williams talking about, as he said, 5 to 7 different things that he has written down on his note card that he wants to work on for the offseason. They get it. This season is a kill. It's over. It's done. There's nothing good that can come out of it. So the smart players and the smart management here is thinking already about 2025, and God bless whatever happens the rest of the way. But that is to just summarize the feel. It's almost like today was 2025 day out here at Haugh.
Well, it's also a very scary and vulnerable place to be in. And maybe that segues us into what I wanted to talk about coming out of Monday night. And it's the fact that you remember when we came back after the Monday of Thanksgiving and Mehdi Eberflus was gone and the dust had settled and the explosion had occurred. And it was like, oh God, there's still 5 games left. And you heard me all that week say, there's still 5 games left. And then last week you heard me say, there's still 4 games left. And now this week I'll say, there's still 3 games left. And my fear is being realized here, Grote, that this team that has been so emotionally worn down by everything they've experienced since London was going to run out of fuel before they got to the end of the season. That certainly seems to have been apparent here in these last 2 games. I asked a question to Jalen Johnson in the locker room on Monday night about how you get across the finish line without much left in the tank. And he said, what makes you think we don't have much left in the tank? And I just said, well, it didn't feel that competitive out there tonight, and it didn't feel that competitive in Santa Clara either. The last 2 games, you have lost by a cumulative score. I think it's 68-25 now, if I'm not mistaken, in the last 2 games. So you have 2 choices here. Either you're spent and you're out of fuel, or you're really bad, And so I know neither one of those is really good. And I know the exception that the players and the coaches take to that is with the sentiment that they're laying down. It's not that at all. And so I did want to play this exchange I had with Thomas Brown, similar topic from Monday night after the game, because I know he brought it up again Monday on the Zoom. And I just want to clarify kind of the conversation that I'm trying to have on a different plane than they're having it on. But here's Thomas Brown and me sounding it out post-game Monday night. There's still 3 games left. It feels like a team that doesn't have a lot left in the tank. How do you get them across the finish line of January 6th?
I would disagree with you. I think if you watch the tape, our guys battled into the very end. So I think saying that we don't have a lot left in the tank will lose to our guys quit. And I didn't see it at all on tape. So I think our guys will continue to battle like they've been battling. I'm going to continue to fight for them and stay behind them. And so we'll go back to work.
Back-to-back really lopsided losses. That's why I make that judgment. You disagree that you guys still have the ability to compete with these teams?
Again, I would challenge you to go turn the tape on and see who didn't play hard or didn't finish. I think it's more about me putting us in better spots on offense to execute and stay on the grass better, and obviously the defense will continue to make strides.
Grote, I wrote in my column coming out of the game Monday night that we'll just agree to disagree because I don't think we're speaking the same language here. I'm not alluding at all to the idea that the Bears are quitting. I was asked on the midday show before the game Monday on whether I was worried about their effort, and I said yes, but it's not because I don't think they have give a damn. It's just because I don't think they've got enough energy left to do anything with their give a damn. And that seems to have been reflected these last 2 games and the performances they've played. I think you would agree, and I listened to you and Studs on the postgame pod on Monday night, that was not a team that was mentally sharp. That was not a team that was emotionally energized. And so the logical judgment and observation is they're out of gas. And yet they still have 3 more games to play against 3 potential playoff opponents here. Good luck.
Yeah. And look, I look at that as, if you don't want to accept the theory of out of gas, and obviously he projected that to quitting, and there's no coach in the NFL who wants to hear that or even hear the hint of it, and he projected that on you. But you know what the other alternative is, Dan, is that you're just bad, that the roster, that this is not a good roster, that this is being harsh, you're not a good interim head coach, the offense doesn't look any better, the whole thing is just so while we try to sort of enable a little bit, say, what, you guys are out of gas. No, I mean, and per DJ Moore, one of the things he said was, because we followed up with him about, the offseason, and his thing was, I'm going to get as far away from Chicago as I possibly can. He said, the first thing I'm going to do is just go on vacation. And he said, let them deal with it. And I assume them is Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren and whomever the new head coach is. And that's his way of saying, when I come back from this vacation and I show up for OTAs or training camp, things better look or at least feel a whole lot different than this. And the more I think about it and the more we have broken it down, there's some real issues on this roster. And you could start up front with the offensive line and the defensive line.
Yeah, and that's the key, right? And that's why this is such a jarring time to be an employee of 1920 Football Drive in Lake Forest, because you look at things through an objective lens and you go, oh my God, this thing has unraveled in extraordinary fashion, and there aren't a ton of obvious answers. Now, look, the optimism with this team is that they've got room with draft capital and salary cap space to make some key roster additions this offseason. They've got a quarterback that people believe in, although there's some questions about whether he's regressed the last couple of weeks since he's had to deal with a new structure with the coaching staff. And so you've got to find ways to convince yourself that you can be good again really quickly, but the results on the field aren't giving you any validation for that optimism. And that's where it gets scary, because you mentioned those two position groups, offensive and defensive line, and you go, who are the difference makers? Like, do they have any? Montez Sweat the other night gets a sack, but by the way, it's negated because he jumped off sides or lined up in the neutral zone. And you just had so many moments where, a football team that has such a small margin for error did things good and then negated it because they were sloppy. That's one. The Doug Kramer penalty is another. You score a touchdown, that comes off the board, and then you get 5 yards back on the very next play, and then you commit a holding penalty and you settle for a field goal. And it's just like they're in their own way a lot, and they're lacking difference makers. I don't know how you could argue that after watching these last 8 football games that whatever the case may be, whatever the reason may be, you have to find more difference makers. And to your point, offensive, defensive line have to be priorities for this football team if they have any hope of competing in this division.
They're a long ways off. They were asking me about that on the score the other day in the defensive line, and I think Montez Sweat is bad of a season, or I don't know, bad is the right way to characterize his season. It was not met. The expectations have not been met by Montez Sweat this year. But that defensive line, as the season has gone on, I can't look at that line and be like, other than him and Billings, I suppose, even Gervon Dexter, it seems like, has regressed. Zach Pickens has been nowhere to be found. DeMarcus Walker had a really good game, actually, the other day in Minnesota, but there have not been enough of those games. And we're looking at guys like Chris Williams, and I'm like, maybe there's something there with Chris Williams. I tend to doubt that you're going to see him as an impact player, but he now has 3 sacks on the season and a couple TFLs. I guess my long-winded way of saying, look, unless Ryan Poles really goes to work on that defensive line, that's a little ways away at this point, which is not something I expected necessarily to be talking about at the end of this season.
Well, and if it was your only position group to work on, you'd feel a little bit more optimistic about targeting your acquisitions, through the draft and free agency. You're also going to have to work on the offensive line. And we've talked in recent weeks about whether Darnell Wright is the only guy that you can actually pencil into your long-term plans beyond next season, and then you draft a guy in round 3 in Karan Amagaji, and the early returns on his performance his rookie season, after he was hurt all off season, was hurt through training camp, didn't play in the preseason, barely got any work, and now you put him out there for his first career start on the road against Brian Flores, and he gets lit up literally from the first quarter on.
Yeah, he did.
And so now you go, okay, like, what do we make of that? Small sample size, but I certainly wouldn't walk into the 2025 offseason being like, well, we've got our future left tackle, like
he was lit up the first time he played. I know that was his first start, but the first time he played the game, I think he was injured in that game, right? And he was just awful.
And that's where there's problems with this, because this is premium draft capital. Zach Pickens, defensive line, 3rd round pick. A Karan Amagaji, 3rd round pick. You go back to Ryan Poles' first year here. Velus Jones, a 3rd round pick. You're supposed to find guys that, if they're not going to start for you, they've got to be key contributors. And it looks like an 0 for 3 there in round 3. And so when you've got these top 100 picks, you got to make some splashes there, and they've yet to make them. I would challenge anyone in this given week to go back and look at the 4 drafts that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes have had in Detroit and what they've squeezed out of them. Like the Detroit Lions got Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th round. The guy's a Pro Bowler and a huge playmaker for them for the rest of his career, as long as they want to keep him. And there's guys like that all through their draft where you're like, oh, they're all still there, and they're all still playing, and they're all still contributing, and some of them are really damn good.
Yeah, well, and for the record, I did not conceptually, believe it or not, I did not have an issue with them starting Karan Amagaji. I get it. It's not ideal, but you're not out there to win anymore. And you do have a 3rd round pick in Karan Amagaji, who has to probably be a starter down the line to make it worthwhile. So I did expect it to be Larry Borum. I think it was an hour or 2 before the game where I was on. I was like, they were asking me, I said it'd probably be Larry Borum, but at this point, you do want to see what you have in these guys. And again, FWIW, for whatever it's worth, Karan Amagaji did not have a training camp. And that's part of the problem. I mean, he came pretty injured. So that's on the Bears. But in other words, it's possible he's not as bad as he's looked. I have not given up on Karan Amagaji potentially being a starting offensive lineman in this league, despite how bad he's been.
You don't have to give up on that, but you can't walk into the 2025 offseason banking on it either. And so that's the problem. Karan Amagaji came pre-injured. Ryan Bates came pre-injured. Nate Davis came pre-unreliable. Tevin Jenkins came always injured, and so like this is the offensive line you built. And so then you stop and you go, okay, you can't get it all done in one offseason. Well, we've had 3 of them now, and you really haven't solidified a single position up there except for the one that you had a top 10 pick with Darnell Wright. So figure it out. And look, like they're gonna host, and I know we'll get into this later in the week with the Lions, and their winning streak's over, and they're hurt, and they're gonna be hungry, and they're gonna be desperate, and they're gonna be fighting for the 1 seed in the NFC, and they're gonna come to Soldier Field on Sunday afternoon pretty juiced up. And so to our previous discussion, if you can't match that juice, get ready, because that Lions team isn't shy about hanging 30 on people. And the Bears defense the last 2 weeks hasn't been shy about giving up 30.
Even in their loss, they lose to the Bills 48-42. Obviously, since the Bears played them, the Lions defense has been a bit of a sieve with Aleem McNeil out, Carlton Davis out.
Still out.
Yeah. Hutchinson's still out. I'm hearing that he might, if they were to make the Super Bowl, that he could be available. God, it must be nice talking about those things. And while we're on it, as we record this on a Wednesday, offensive line wise, Ryan Bates, Tevin Jenkins, Braxton Jones, none practiced on Wednesday. So that continues to be an issue, and one of them that we will follow all the way through. I want to play a little bit of Caleb Williams, because I think Caleb Williams was great at the podium today. Certainly being very reflective of the season. Like I said, that he's hated the losing, and it's really affecting him. I mentioned that he's taken notes already for the offseason. But one of the real issues for Caleb Williams, and it was apparent in their last game against Minnesota, is that the accuracy issues have continued for Caleb Williams. And specifically, the play that was brought up was the double move by Keenan Allen, where Caleb misses him in the end zone on the left side. So that was sort of the base for the questioning. But here is Caleb Williams in general about his accuracy issues at times this season.
I think some of it comes to the fundamentals and footwork and stuff like that. I think some of it also comes from the amount of reps, that a rookie player overall, just a rookie player, gets, and finding that feel in the throughout the games and throughout practices and stuff like that of the plays and things like that. And so when you get in live bullets, you're not thinking so much about those those small things. You're thinking about a lot bigger things, like pressures or coverages or the play and the routes and stuff like that. So I think it just comes down to the reps, and then footwork and fundamentals and just being in rhythm.
Does it frustrate you?
Yeah, it's frustrating. I hate missing passes, especially ones that I've been pretty consistent on for I would say a good amount of time, but that's coming.
Dan, since we missed you on the podcast the other night, what did you think about Caleb Williams's night in Minnesota?
Yeah, I was bothered because it was a clear step back from where he was the previous, 3 weeks earlier against the same opponent, and you use that as a measuring stick to see if he can adapt to their changes, and they didn't do it really well. Now, look, like there were some drop passes in that game. Those have been well documented, but Caleb also missed throws where I'm commenting up in the press box. When you've got receivers that are as established as this trio is, some of those 50-50 balls have to be 50-50 balls. They can't be airmailed by 5-6 yards. And there's been too many examples of the inaccuracy down the field where they're not only misses, Grote, they're like the guy didn't have any prayer. They didn't even have a chance to make an attempt at the catch. And so those are the things that I would hope that they dial in on, whoever it may be, this offseason, to figure out why is that occurring. If it's just something as simple as just keeping your footwork calmer and sharper when you're in the live bullets, as Caleb put it, then so be it. But at some point, you've got to find answers to those questions, because you're leaving a lot of yards, a lot of points on the table when you're misfiring as badly as he is on certain plays. And then you get into an example where the big play that's been all over social media, the one where he scrambled around for 7-8 seconds and then threw a ball into the end zone to Keenan Allen and then got his clock, knocked when he got hit there. And you just don't want to see that, because that's a scary time for a quarterback to be taking those shots in this league, because that'll knock you out for 3-4 weeks if you're not careful.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's been times, and in that last game, he looked flustered. The offense looked disorganized in general at times. So there's just not a lot of thumbs up for Caleb Williams in that game.
Looked like they didn't have a lot left in the tank.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was thinking about that too while that cut was playing. There's a fine line between like giving up and having given up on the season. I mean, how? Because they've given up on the season. Duh. They're eliminated. They know that there is no way to make this season into a positive. That's over. Even if they win these final 3 games, it's cooked, man. So when you've given up on a season, how is it possible that you wouldn't kind of be giving up on the field too? Like, there's a human nature element here too that nobody wants to admit. And I actually understand why they wouldn't admit it. I wouldn't admit it, but it's true.
No, I agree. And look, like, I don't expect them to make the admission, I guess, in retrospect with some of the lines of questioning, but it is a reality. And that's why I said, like, you need in this game, particularly when you're a team like the Bears with a thin margin of error, you need to be mentally sharp and emotionally energized. And it's hard to find that week after week after week after week when you reach this stage and you really have nothing to play for. This team has nothing to play for but 2025. And that's a much harder motivational tactic to be like, oh, this is going to help us in week 6 next season. If we can just find our rhythm tonight, it's going to help us in week 6 next year. It's just a harder thing than, like, if we can put a touchdown on the board on this drive, we've got a chance to stay in the wild card race. Totally different mindset, totally different psychology. And so, again, I said it 2 weeks ago. I said it last week. I'll say it again with an amended number. There's still 3 games remaining, and these next two come on short weeks of preparation. So, again, good luck.
Yep, they are up and running out here at Haugh, and we will continue to track them every day out here as they move towards a good old-fashioned Sunday noon game, Bears and Lions at Soldier Field. Dan, thanks for being a participant today, playing sick. Go crumble up some saltines and throw them in some ginger ale and slam it.
One little nugget, little Netflix sick day revelation. Adrian Colbert went to Costa Rica to do ayahuasca with Aaron Rodgers. You'll learn that the next time you log into the 3-part docuseries with Aaron Rodgers on Netflix. So that was something
does not
I picked up
surprise
today.
me. He is of the earth, Adrian Colbert.
Yeah.
He is organic, man.
Yeah.
That does not surprise me. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, yeah. Go enjoy. Do whatever you do while you're sick. And I do hope, my friend, that you are back out here at the Hall tomorrow. But take your time, man. We got this. This. And people were asking about you. They were like, "Was Grote, you going to go do the podcast solo?" I go, "No, my guy's playing hurt today. Don't worry."
Damn gamer is what he is. By the way, I'm soft as hell when I'm sick. And like, if you would have seen me, like, look, like this started to come on when I was like getting to the airport on Tuesday. And so you're like, what do I do? Do I get on this plane or what? I was like Caleb. in seat 21C like this. Leaning back, looking like a mess. The guy in 21B and 21A, I think they have some worries, and I apologize to them because I didn't know what else to do. Yeah,
it's a tough spot when you have to like admit yourself, crap, this is for real. I'm sick. I'm a sick person right now, and I need to act accordingly. That is the truth. For Dan Wiederer, for our executive producer, Adam Studzinski, I am Mark Grote. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.